September 1971, county equipment auction. Outside Hartfield, Iowa, a woman raises her hand. $40. The crowd goes quiet, then someone laughs. Because the tractor she just bought is a disaster, a 1948 Oliver 88, sitting behind a collapsed barn for 6 years. Hydraulics frozen solid. Clutch gone entirely. Tires cracked down to the cords. Rust so bad you could push your thumb through the fenders. No seat. Just 4 bolts sticking up from a bare mounting plate. Bird nests stuffed in the air cleaner. Mouse damage threading through the wiring. Wasp colony living inside the exhaust pipe. The auctioneer almost apologized for listing it. Next item, folks. 1948, Oliver 88. Been sitting a while, hydraulics locked. Clutch shot, tires done. Engine doesn't turn by hand. Somebody give me 25 for the scrap weight, nobody moved. 25? Come on, that's scrap price. The rear end alone is worth that. A salvage man in the back raised his hand. 25.40. The woman's voice cut through clear. The salvage man turned around, looked at her, didn't bid again, because $40 was more than he wanted to spend on something he'd have to haul. Sold. $40 to the lady in the blue truck. Her name was Rebecca Anderson. Everyone called her Beck, 33 years old, white woman, farmer. Alone. And the county had a new story to tell. Crazy Beck bought the junk Oliver, the one behind a Kessler's barn, the one with the wasp nest in the exhaust, paid $40 for it. $40 for a pile of rust that should have gone to the crusher. The story traveled the way all stories travel in small farming counties, from the feed store to the co-op, from the co-op to the diner, from the diner to the church parking lot. And at every stop the story got a little funnier, because Rebecca Anderson was not the kind of person Hartfield County expected to be buying tractors. Except what nobody in Hartfield knew was that Beck had been planning this for 14 months. She didn't buy a broken tractor. She bought the last piece of a puzzle she'd already started building. 2 of her brothers helped load it. Brandon and Jeffrey, borrowed trailer groaning under the weight, winch screaming as the Oliver slid up the ramps, metal grinding on metal, the sound of a machine that hadn't moved under any power in half a decade. Brandon stood at the back of the trailer, looked at the thing they'd just loaded. Beck, what are you gonna do with this? Fix it! Fix it with what? It needs everything, then I'll fix everything. Brandon shook his head. Older brother, done arguing. He tied the chains down. They drove home. By end of week, Hartfield had its story. Fee store to co-op, co-op to diner, diner to church parking lot. Every stop the story got funnier. Because Beck wasn't the kind of woman who bought tractors, which was the whole problem with how they saw her. They saw a woman buying junk. They were actually watching a woman execute a plan 14 months in the making. But nobody bothered to ask why. Let me tell you who Beck was, because what she did with that Oliver 88 over the next 11 months only makes sense if you understand where she came from. Born 1938, 200-acre farm west of Hartfield. Her father, Kenneth Anderson, ran cattle and corn the way 3 generations of Andersons had before him. Carefully, conservatively, always cash in the bank. Kenneth didn't believe in debt the way some men don't believe in ghosts. Not that he argued against it. It simply didn't exist in his world. Kenneth was also the kind of farmer who fixed everything himself, not because he enjoyed it, but because paying someone else to do what your own hands could do struck him as a fundamental violation of common sense. He kept a shop behind the house, nothing fancy, concrete floor, wood stove, workbench his grandfather built, tools accumulating since before the First War. Wrenches that still had his father's grip marks worn into the handles. A vise bolted to that bench since 1919. Beck was youngest of 4 children. Only girl, 3 brothers, Brandon, Jeffrey, Ryan, all worked the farm with Kenneth through high school. All 3 left for town jobs by their early 20s. Brandon went to packing plant in Omaha. Jeffrey joined the Army. Ryan took mechanic job in Council Bluffs. Beck stayed, not because she had nowhere else to go. She'd been accepted to Teachers College. Cedar Falls, had the grades for it. Had the recommendation letters. Had a suitcase packed and a bus ticket bought for August 1956. But Kenneth's health started failing that summer. His heart, doctor in Hartfield told him to slow down. And Kenneth told the doctor that slowing down and farming were 2 things that didn't fit in the same sentence. Beck unpacked the suitcase, put the bus ticket in a drawer, told the Teachers College she'd come next year. Next year became the year after. The year after became never. She took over the daily operation of the farm in stages. First the cattle chores, then the field work, then in the books by 1960, when she was 22, Beck was running the farm in everything but name, while Kenneth supervised from a lawn chair by the shop. Offering corrections that grew less frequent as the years passed, Not because Beck needed fewer corrections, because Kenneth was learning something most fathers of that generation never admitted out loud. His daughter was better at this than he was. Beck had a quality that's hard to describe, impossible to miss if you spent any time around her. She saw waste the way a bloodhound smells a trail. Not stinginess. Stingy people save money out of fear. Beck eliminated waste out of principle. Every dollar that left the farm without earning its keep was a personal offense. She patched tires that other farmers would have replaced. She rebuilt starters that the dealer said were beyond repair. She kept a ledger, physical handwritten. Every expense down to the penny, every repair down to the hour. Not because she enjoyed bookkeeping, because the ledger told her the truth about her operation. And Beck Anderson preferred truth to comfort. Spring of 1963, Christopher King came calling, son of the town banker, clean hands, soft shoes, nice smile that probably worked on other women. He asked Beck to marry him, in the parlor flowers on the table that he'd brought. Like flowers could soften what he was really asking. You could sell the farm. My father has a buyer interested. We could move to Des Moines. I have a position waiting at the bank there. Beck looked at him. And what would I do in Des Moines? Whatever you'd like. We'd have a nice house. You wouldn't have to work. She stood up, opened the door. Christopher, I like working. I like this farm. I like fixing things with my own hands. But you're a woman, Margaret. You shouldn't have to. She cut him off before he could finish that sentence. Thank you for the flowers. He left. She never saw him again. The county auntie whispered. Beck Anderson turned down a banker's son. Too proud to be a proper wife. Gonna end up alone on that farm. She didn't care. Because alone with 200 paid-for acres was better than married to a man who thought work was something women shouldn't have to do. Kenneth's funeral was small, Methodist church in town, 30 people. Most of them farmers who'd known Kenneth for 40 years. The pastor said kind things about hard work and integrity. Beck didn't cry. She never cried, not because she didn't feel. Because crying didn't solve problems. And Beck Anderson was a woman who solved problems. Kenneth left her the farm, the cattle, the equipment, $14,000 in savings. Beck was 26, sole owner. Everything paid for, free and clear. Brandon showed up the day after the funeral, stood in the kitchen. You gonna be okay out here by yourself? I've been running this place for 4 years, Brandon. Nothing's changed except Dad's not in the lawn chair anymore. You could sell, move to town. You don't have to do this. Beck looked at him. Do what? Farm the land I grew up on? Use the tools Dad taught me to use? Keep doing exactly what I've been doing? Brandon shifted his weight. It's just. You're a woman, and people are gonna talk. Let them talk. And that was the end of that conversation. July 1970, 14 months before the auction, Beck drove to Carroll County, 60 miles north. Farm sale, hog operation liquidating. Among the equipment sat a Clark Bobcat skid loader with a blown transmission. Nobody wanted it. Because a skid loader with no transmission is about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. But the engine in that skid loader was a different story. Continental F244, flathead 6-cylinder, 244 cubic inches. A factory rated 50 horsepower. The engine was running fine. It was the transmission that killed the machine, not the motor. Beck walked around that skid loader 3 times, looked at the engine, looked at the blown transmission. Did math in her head that nobody else at that sale was doing. She bid $60. Nobody bid against her, because who wants a skid loader that can't skid? Sold. $60 to the lady from Hartfield. Beck pulled the engine that afternoon, right there in the seller's yard. Sock set from her truck. Chain hoist the seller let her borrow. 3 hours of work. She loaded the Continental into her truck bed, left the carcass behind, drove home, baked the truck to Kenneth's shop, used the chain hoist her grandfather installed in 1923, lowered the Continental onto an engine stand. Then she started measuring. Because here's what Beck knew that nobody else in Hartfield County knew. The Oliver 88 came with a Waukesha 231 cubic inch engine, made about 53 horsepower with a belt 38 at the drawbar, descent adequate. But adequate wasn't what Beck wanted. The Continental made 50 horsepower, but it was torquier, lower RPM power, better for field work. And here's what mattered most: same era, same design philosophy, same general architecture. Bolt patterns were different. Motor mounts were different. Bell housing was different. But the differences were measured in inches, not feet, which meant an adapter plate could bridge the gap. If you knew how to build one. Beck spent 2 weeks in that shop, both engines side by side, the Continental on its stand, the Waukesha specs spread across Kenneth's workbench, measuring, comparing, sketching on graph paper, working out the geometry of how a Continental F244 could be mated to an Oliver 88 drivetrain. She figured it out. All of it. The mounting bracket dimensions, the adapter plate bolt pattern, the pilot bore diameter, the stress distribution, every calculation, every measurement, every angle. She figured it out before she ever went to that auction in September, before she ever bid $40 on that rusted Oliver. That's the part Hartfield didn't understand. They thought they were watching impulse. They were actually watching execution. A plan 14 months in the making. Winter 1971, Brandon showed up at Beck's door. 2 suitcases. Hat in hand, lost my job. Packing plant laid off 200 people, Beck made coffee, didn't ask questions. You can stay in the upstairs room. Long as you need, Brandon stayed. At first, he was skeptical about everything. The farm, the savings, the way Beck did things. One night, he said, "You could expand, buy more land, get bigger equipment. Really make something of this place." Beck looked at him over her ledger. "I have 200 acres paid for, equipment that works, money in the bank. What am I missing?" "Growth, Beck. Progress. Growth costs money. Progress means debt. I'm not interested in either." Brandon didn't understand, not yet, but he would. September morning. Day after the auction, the Oliver sat in Beck's yard, dew on the rusted metal, morning sun catching the worst of the damage. Beck walked around it slow, taking inventory, form. Solid heavy channel iron, straight and true. 30 years of Iowa weather hadn't touched the main rails. Oliver built it bulletproof, rear end. Perfect transmission, 6-speed with live PTO, final drives massively overbuilt, heavy cast iron housings. Bull gears that could handle more torque than the original engine ever produced. The engine would wear out, sheet metal would rot. Hydraulics would fail. But that rear end would still be turning when everything around it returned to earth. Brandon came out with coffee, stood next to her. "You really gonna fix this thing?" "Already started." She pointed to the shop. Continental's been waiting inside for 14 months. "Been ready, just needed the right tractor to come along." Brandon's eyes went wide. "You bought the engine before the tractor?" "Bought the engine first, figured out how to make it fit. Then waited for the right tractor. And this rust bucket is the right tractor? Frame's good. Rear end's perfect. Everything else is just parts." She took a sip of coffee. "This Oliver was $40. The Continental was $60. I've got another $260 budgeted for bearings. Seals, gaskets, steel plate, hardware. Total $360 for a tractor that doesn't run. For a tractor that will pull a 4-bottom plow through Iowa clay without breaking a sweat." Brandon shook his head. "Beck, every other farmer in this county would just go to the dealer. Buy a new John Deere. Take out a loan. Every other farmer in this county will spend the next 10 years making payments. I'll spend the next 11 months in the shop. Then I'll own a working tractor, free and clear." She looked at the Oliver. "The county thinks I'm crazy." "Yeah, they do, good." The story traveled. Always does in small counties. Crazy Beck bought that junk Oliver. $40 for rust. What's she gonna do with it? Probably use it for target practice. Donald Moore heard about it at the co-op. Donald farmed 400 acres north of Beck's property, 2 John Deere 4020s, $6,500 each, payments every month. He told his wife about it over dinner. That Anderson girl bought the worst tractor at the auction. Why would she do that? Who knows? Woman's always been strange. His wife looked at him. Strange how? Doesn't spend money, doesn't go to town, just works that farm like she's got something to prove. Maybe she does. Donald didn't answer, because what could a woman possibly have to prove? Down at Hartfield Implement, Stephen Wright heard the story too. Stephen ran the Oliver and John Deere dealership. Only one in the county. He laughed when his parts manager mentioned it. "Rebecca Anderson bought a broken Oliver?" "That's what I heard. For how much?" $40. Stephen laughed harder. "Well, when she realizes she can't fix it, she'll come to me for a real tractor." But Stephen Wright didn't know Beck Anderson. Not really. None of them did. Because what they saw was a woman buying junk. What Beck saw was a frame Oliver's best engineers had overbuilt, a transmission that would outlast every other part of the machine, a rear end designed to handle more power than the factory ever gave it. She saw a $60 surplus engine sitting in her shop, making 12 more horsepower than the original. She saw her father's tools, her father's workbench, her father's way of thinking. That, the distance between a pile of parts and a working machine, was nothing more than knowledge and time. She saw $360 worth of metal, and a winter's worth of work. Everyone else saw garbage. That's the difference between someone who buys and someone who builds. A buyer walks onto a lot and pays the sticker price. A builder looks at what the world has thrown away and sees what it could become. And Beck Anderson was a builder. Had been since she was 12 years old. Watching Kenneth rebuild a corn picker in that shop. Learning that every machine is just a collection of parts, and every part can be fixed or replaced or adapted, if you know how, if you're willing to do the work, if you don't care what people think. Beck didn't care what people thought, never had, because people's opinions didn't pull plows, didn't plant corn, didn't pay bills. Work did, results did. And Beck Anderson was about to show Hartfield County what results looked like, on a $360 budget, with her father's tools, and a plan nobody understood, until they saw it work. October 1971, harvest done, cattle settled for winter. Beck started. She backed the trailer into the shop, lowered the ramps, winched the Oliver down onto the concrete floor, then began the strip down, every bolt, every bracket, every rusted fitting that hadn't moved in 6 years. She laid parts out on the floor the way Kenneth taught her. Left side, right side, front to back, a map of the machine spread across concrete, some bolts so rusted she had to heat them with a torch. The acetylene flame turning rust cherry red before the threads would give. Some fittings so seized she had to drill them out entirely. New hole threads, new fasteners that would never rust like the originals did. Brandon watched from the doorway sometimes, didn't offer to help, just watched, because this was Beck's project, her plan, her machine. One evening he finally spoke. "You really think you can make this work?" Beck didn't look up from the wire brush in her hand, scrubbing decades of grime off the frame rails. "I know the math works. I know the geometry works. The rest is just labor, and if it doesn't, then I'll have a $360 pile of parts." She kept brushing, little flakes falling like snow. "But it will work." Because failure wasn't an option Beck entertained, not with money, not with machines, not with anything. The frame was solid. 30 years of Iowa weather hadn't touched the main rails. Oliver used heavy channel iron for a reason, engineers who understood that a tractor's skeleton had to outlast everything bolted to it. Beck wire brushed at every inch, rust dust filling the shop with orange haze, then primed it, then painted it Oliver green. Not for looks, because paint prevented rust, and rust was waste. And waste was the enemy Beck fought every single day. The rear end came next. Transmission and final drives as one unit. She pulled it with the chain hoist, set it on blocks, drained the old oil, which came out looking like coffee brewed in a mud puddle, black thick, smelling like metal death. She split the case, inspected every gear, every bearing, every shaft that transferred power from engine to wheels. The gears were perfect, 23 years old, and they looked like they came out of the box last Tuesday. No wear, no chips, no scores, just honest metal doing its job without complaint. Beck replaced the bearings anyway, $34 from Napa in Hartfield. Because good enough bearings become failed bearings at the worst possible time. Replaced the seals, $12. Reassembled the transmission with fresh oil, the kind that didn't smell like death. She adjusted the clutch with new friction discs, ordered from an Oliver parts dealer in Minnesota. $28 for the discs, plus $8 shipping, which hurt, because shipping was money leaving the farm without doing work. But necessary, because a slipping clutch was worse than $8 in shipping costs. She rebuilt the hydraulic pump with a seal kit. $8, one afternoon of careful work, replacing every rubber component that time and weather had turned brittle. The Continental sat in the corner on its stand, where it had been waiting since July 1970. Beck had already gone through it once. New rings, new bearings, valve job, fresh gaskets. Total parts $67, the engine was ready. Had been ready for over a year. Now came the hard part, making it fit where it was never designed to go. The Continental's mounting feet were spaced 4 inches wider than the Oliver's engine bay, which meant custom brackets. Beck fabricated them from 1/4-inch plate steel, cutting on the band saw that Kenneth bought in 1951. Drilling on the drill press that still had her grandfather's handwriting on the depth stop. Welding with the stick welder that had built more repairs than Beck could count. She welded each bracket to the Oliver frame rails, then shimmed each mount with rubber pads cut from old head conveyor belt to absorb vibration because a ridge mount would crack under the engine's twisting force. But a shimmed mount would flex just enough to survive. The bell housing was the real problem. Continental's flywheel housing had a different bolt pattern than the Oliver transmission input. Different pilot bore, different everything, which meant Beck needed an adapter plate, a piece of steel that would bridge 2 incompatible systems. Make them speak the same mechanical language. She bought inch-thick steel plate from a surplus yard in Omaha, $11, measured, scribed, Kenter, punched every hole location. Then drilled, 14 bolt holes total, 7 for the Continental pattern, 7 for the Oliver pattern. The center pilot hole was critical, had to be perfectly centered, perfectly sized, perfectly true, because a misaligned pilot hole would destroy the transmission input bearing in one season. She used the drill press. Started with a 1/4-inch bit, worked up through increasingly larger sizes, 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch. Then finished with a boring bar, the same boring bar Kenneth bought in 1947. Used maybe 5 times in 24 years. Waiting for this exact job, the adapter plate took 3 weekends, not because it was complicated, because it had to be right. Beck checked her measurements so many times she could recite them from memory. Contour to center spacing, bolt circle diameter. Pilot bore concentricity, every dimension mattered, every calculation had consequences. December 1971, Thursday evening. She mated the engine to the transmission, slid the Continental into the Oliver frame. Perfect fit, the adapter plate aligned. The pilot bore centered, the mounting brackets holding firm. She bolted everything down, torqued to spec, stood back the Continental sitting in that Oliver frame like it was born there. Which it wasn't. It fit because Beck had spent 14 months making sure it would. She fabricated new throttle linkage from steel rod, plumbed a new fuel line from the Oliver's original tank, a dead and inline filter pulled from a junked truck, because clean fuel was the difference between an engine that ran and an engine that didn't. She adapted the Oliver's radiator to the Continental's water pump. Combination of hose clamps, a custom aluminum fitting she turned on Kenneth's lathe, the lathe that hadn't seen use since 1963, the cutting oil still in the reservoir. She added a pint. The machine ran as if Kenneth had just stepped away for lunch. She rewired the electrical system, new ignition, new starter solenoid, new voltage regulator, $31 in parts from the auto supply in Hartfield. January 1972, Saturday morning, cold, clear, time for first start. Brandon was there, watching, because this was the moment that proved whether Beck was brilliant or crazy. She turned the key, pulled the choke, pressed the starter button. The Continental turned over, once, twice, cuffed, caught. The engine settled into an idle that was deeper than any Oliver 88 ever produced from the factory. Fuller, heavier, the sound of 244 cubic inches, breathing through a pipe designed for 231. It sounded wrong for an Oliver. It sounded right for what it was. Beck let it warm up 10 minutes, watching gauges, listening to valves. Feeling the frame for vibration, then she heard it. A sound that didn't belong, grinding. Metal on metal. From the bell housing, she killed the engine. Brandon saw her face change. What's wrong? Beck didn't answer. She was already on the ground, sliding under the tractor. Trouble? She saw it immediately, the adapter plate, cracked hairline at first, running from one bolt hole to the pilot bore. But as the engine warmed, as the parts expanded, the crack had spread. Now it was a 1/4 inch wide. And growing. 3 months of work, 3 weekends on that adapter plate alone. Died. Beck didn't cry. She never cried, but she sat on the shop floor for a long time, looking at that cracked plate, turning it over in her hands. The measurements were right. The holes were centered, the bore was true. So what went wrong? Brandon sat down next to her. Can you fix it? No. Can you make another one? I don't know where I went wrong. Heat expansion, maybe. Or the bolt torque created stress points I didn't account for. Or the steel had a flaw I couldn't see. She set it down, $11 for the plate, 3 weekends of work. And it's junk. Brandon was quiet for a moment then. What would Dad have done? Beck looked at him. He would have figured it out. Yeah, he would have. Brandon stood up, went to Kenneth's workbench, started looking through the drawers. What are you doing? Dad kept notebooks. Engineering stuff, measurements, formulas. You know Dad. He wrote everything down. He pulled out a black notebook. Leather-bound page yellowed with age, opened it. Page after page of Kenneth's handwriting, diagrams, calculations, stress distribution formulas. Brandon flipped through, stopped here. He handed the notebook to Beck. A page titled, in Kenneth's careful script, Plates. Stress distribution. Kenneth had worked on adapter plates before, for something else. Decades ago, but the principles were the same. Beck read her father's notes, his formulas, his warnings written in fountain pen ink that hadn't faded. Don't put bolt holes on stress lines. Add radius to pilot bore to distribute load. Pre-drill relief holes at corners to prevent crack propagation. Relief holes. She'd missed the relief holes. That was it, small detail, critical difference. The crack started at a corner where stress concentrated, where a relief hole would have dispersed the force. Beck stood up. I need another plate. But before she could drive to Omaha for more steel, December turned to January. And Beck made a mistake, late night in the shop, 11 p.m. She was welding new mounting brackets, because the first set weren't quite right, quarter inch off on one side, which would throw everything out of alignment, so she was remaking them. Tired, running on coffee and stubbornness, the torch slipped, molten metal splashed, caught her left forearm. Second-degree burn, 3 inches long, pain like she'd never felt. She dropped the torch, stumbled to the sink, cold water, which helped, not enough. She drove herself to the clinic, one-handed, teeth gritted. Dr. Harrison was on call. Took one look at the burn. "What were you doing at 11 p.m. that required a welding torch?" "Working. On what?" "A tractor." Dr. Harrison shook his head while he cleaned the wound, applied burn cream, wrapped it in gauze. "Rebecca, you need to be more careful. Next time it could be your face, your eyes. There won't be a next time." But there almost was. Because the burn got infected, she couldn't work for 2 weeks. First time in her life she'd lost time to injury. Brandon stayed at the farm, helped with cattle, watched Beck struggle with frustration, with pain. With the reality that her body had limits, her mind didn't want to acknowledge. One night he said, "Maybe this is a sign. A sign of what? That this project is too dangerous. You're doing work that requires 2 people. You're using equipment that's what? Old. Dad's tools are 30 years old. The welder is from 1955. You don't have proper ventilation. You're working alone." Beck looked at her bandaged arm. Dad worked alone for 40 years, never got hurt. Dad had more sense than to work tired. That stung. Because it was true. She had been pushing too hard, trying to meet a deadline. Only she cared about trying to prove something to people who weren't even watching. Beck took a week off, let the burn heal, reorganized the shop, built a proper welding table with ventilation hood, installed better lighting. When she went back to work, she went slower. More careful, more like Kenneth. The accident added 2 weeks to the timeline. But it probably saved her from worse. February 1972, Beck bought another steel plate, $11. This time she followed Kenneth's notes exactly. Relief holes at corners, front radius on the pilot bore, bolt holes offset from stress lines. Another 3 weekends. But this time Brandon helped. Holding measurements, double-checking calculations, reading Kenneth's handwriting when Beck's eyes got tired. Thursday evening, round 2, she mated the engine again, bolted everything, torqued to spec. This time she ran it longer before testing under load. 10 minutes, 20-30. Temperature stabilized, no unusual sounds. She slid underneath, the adapter plate was holding, no cracks, no stress marks, no vibration. Brandon was grinning. "You did it. We did it." She finished the electrical system. New ignition, new starter solenoid, new voltage regulator that Brandon helped install, mounted new rear tires. Used but good tread, $50 the pair from a tire dealer in Council Bluffs. Ryan owed the guy a favor, called it in for his sister. Beck welded a seat mount, bolted on a seat pulled from a scrapped Alice Chalmers at a farm sale. The seat was orange. The tractor was green. She didn't care. Seat was comfortable. And it was free. Total investment a liver 88 frame. $40. Continental F244 engine. $60 engine rebuild parts. $67 transmission bearings and seals. $46 clutch discs. $28 hydraulic seal kit. $8 Nabder plate steel. 2 attempts. $22 fuel, electrical, and hardware. $31 tires. $50 miscellaneous. $8 total. $360. 11 months, evenings and weekends. 1 woman, 1 shop. Her father's tools, her father's notes. And a plan that finally worked. August 1972, Saturday morning, Beck started the Oliver, for real this time, turned the key, pulled the choke, pressed the starter, Continental turned over twice. Coughed once. Caught the engine settled into an idle that was steady as a heartbeat deep. Strong the exhaust note, different from any tractor in Hartfield County. Beck let it warm up. 10 minutes, watching gauges, oil, pressure climbing, temperature rising, charging system working. Everything perfect. She drove it to the east field. Hooked up a 4-bottom plow. Original Oliver 88 could pull 3-bottom in heavy Iowa clay without trouble. 4-bottom was pushing it. You'd hear the engine lug, feel the RPMs drop, watch the front end get light as the tractor fought for traction. Beck dropped the 4-bottom into ground. Opened the throttle, the Continental pulled all 4 through black Iowa soil without a stumble. No lugging, no straining, no front end lifting. Just steady, relentless forward motion. The sound of an engine doing exactly what it was built for, with power to spare. 12 extra horsepower doesn't sound like much on paper. In the field, it's the difference between a tractor that's working and a tractor that's loafing. Beck's Oliver was loafing. Donald Moore was combining beans in the adjacent field that morning. He shut off his combine, watched Beck make 3 passes with the 4-bottom. Then drove his pickup to the fence line, waited. Beck saw him, pulled up. That doesn't sound like an Oliver engine. It's not. What is it? Continental F244 out of a skid loader. Donald looked at the tractor the way people look at things that contradict what they thought they knew. You put a Continental in an Oliver 88. I did how? Adapter plate. Custom mounts. Took about 11 months. How much? $360 all in. Donald Moore farmed 400 acres with 2 John Deere 4020s that cost him $6,500 each. He was looking at a tractor pulling 4-bottom through Iowa clay for $360. He didn't say anything for a while. Farmers process things slowly when the numbers don't make sense. Your dad would have liked this. He would have told me the paint was uneven. Donald laughed. First time anyone in Hartfield County had laughed about Beck Anderson's tractor project in a way that wasn't mockery. This time the story spread different, not fast. Not like the joke had spread a year earlier. This was farmers telling other farmers something they'd seen with their own eyes, and farmers don't exaggerate about field performance. They can't. The field doesn't lie. Every man in the county knew what 4-bottom plow looked like behind Oliver 88. It looked like struggle. Beck's Oliver wasn't struggling. By October, 3 men had driven to the Anderson farm, asked to see the tractor. Beck showed them, explained the conversion. Showed them the adapter plate, the mounting brackets, the custom linkage. 2 of them asked if she could do the same for them. She said she'd think about it. Stephen Wright heard about it in November. 3 farmers in his showroom, looking at new equipment, talking. Did you see what Beck Anderson did with that junk, Oliver? Yeah. Donald Moore says it pulls better than his 4020 for $360. Stephen's ears perked up. What's this about? The farmers told him. Stephen listened. His face didn't change, but inside he was calculating. If Beck was doing engine conversions for $360, and farmers were comparing them to $6,500 new tractors, that was a problem. Not now, but eventually. After the farmers left, Stephen made a phone call to the regional Oliver rep. I've got a woman in my territory doing unauthorized conversions on Oliver tractors. What kind of conversions? Putting Continental engines in them. Telling farmers it's equivalent to new machines. Is it working? Apparently, silence on the other end. We need documentation. If there's a failure, if someone gets hurt, it could come back on Oliver. Understood. Stephen hung up. He wasn't going to wait for a failure. He was going to create concern. Spring 1973. Gary Allen showed up at Beck's farm, hat in hand. Farmall M on a trailer, engine tired, burning oil, losing compression. Heard you might be able to help. Beck looked at the Farmall, walked around it once. What's your budget? Dealer wants $900 for a rebuilt engine. I don't have $900. What do you have? Maybe $500, Beck thought. I can do it for $150 labor if you supply the parts. I know where there's a Continental that'll fit. Probably $300 for the engine and rebuild parts. Total around $450. Gary's face changed. You serious? Dead serious. When can you start? 2 weeks. Beck found the engine at a surplus auction in Des Moines. Built the adapter plate on Kenneth's drill press. Had the Farmall running on new Continental in 6 weeks. Gary paid her $150. In cash, hands shaking a little. You just saved my operation. You saved your own operation by not taking on debt you couldn't afford. Word got around about Gary's Farmall. By summer, 2 more farmers had asked Beck for conversions. But then Stephen Wright started talking. Not directly. Never directly. He mentioned things to customers, dropped hints at the co-op, made sure the right people heard the right concerns. Those backyard conversions are a liability waiting to happen. Mixing engine brands? That's not how engineering works. When that adapter plate fails at full load, someone's gonna get killed. Oliver would never approve that kind of modification. The whispers spread. By fall, one of the farmers who'd asked Beck for a conversion called to cancel. Sorry, Beck. Stephen at the dealership said these conversions might not be safe. Did Stephen show you any evidence? Well, no, but he's the dealer. He knows this stuff. Beck hung up. She knew what was happening. March 1973, Stephen Wright went to the Hartfield Town Council, filed a formal complaint, unauthorized mechanical work. Safety hazard liability issue. She's not a licensed mechanic. She's not insured. She's operating what amounts to an unlicensed repair shop. The council called a hearing. Beck received a letter. You are required to appear before the Hartfield Town Council to address allegations regarding unauthorized commercial mechanical repair operations. Brandon read the letter. They're trying to shut you down. Let them try. The hearing was on a Tuesday night, town hall. 30 people in the audience. Stephen Wright presented first. Miss Anderson is performing engine modifications without proper certification. These are not simple repairs. She's mixing incompatible components. creating machines that were never designed to work together. It's only a matter of time before something catastrophic happens. He showed photos, Beck's adapter plate, the Continental engine in the Oliver frame. "Does this look safe to you?" Council members murmured. Then it was Beck's turn. She brought a briefcase, opened it, pulled out her ledger. "I've performed 4 engine conversions. 3 are currently in operation. 1 is still being tested. Here are the specs for each conversion. Here are the torque specifications. Here are the stress calculations. Here are the safety factors. Every bolt is torqued to manufacturer specification or higher. Every weld is inspected. Every component is tested before installation." She handed the ledger to the council president. "I have documentation for every conversion, every part, every hour of labor, every safety check. Mr. Wright claims I'm creating dangerous machines. I claim I'm creating machines that work better than what the factory produced." She pulled out another document. "Here's a letter from Gary Allen, the first farmer I did a conversion for. His farm all has logged 800 hours since conversion. 0 mechanical failures. 0 safety incidents." She looked at Stephen Wright. "Mr. Wright is concerned about safety. But his real concern is business. I charge $150 for labor. He charged $900 for a rebuilt engine. I'm not a threat to safety. I'm a threat to his profit margin." The room went quiet. Council president looked at Stephen. "Mr. Wright, do you have any documented evidence of actual safety violations?" "Not yet, but not yet means no." He looked at Beck. "Miss Anderson, are you operating this as a commercial business?" "No, sir. I help neighbors. They pay me for my time. I don't advertise. I don't have a shop sign. This is neighborly assistance, not a business." "Are you performing work on vehicles intended for public roads?" "No, sir. Only farm equipment used on private property," the council president conferred with ER. Then, "Miss Anderson, we find no violation of town ordinances. However, we strongly encourage you to obtain liability insurance and to document all work thoroughly." This hearing is concluded. Stephen Wright's face went red. He'd lost in public. August 1974. Hartfield County Fair. The Fair Board invited Beck to demonstrate her Oliver tractor pull competition. Not reins, just demonstrations of power. Beck agreed. She brought the Oliver Continental engine, now had 2,000 hours. Running perfect, the competition. Pull a weighted sled as far as possible. 6 tractors entered. 2 John Deere 4020s, 1 International 1066, 1 Case 1070, 1 Massey Ferguson 1100, Beck's 1948, Oliver 88. The crowd laughed when they saw the Oliver. "That old thing? It's older than most people here. Bet it doesn't even make it 50 feet. Donald Moore was there. He'd brought one of his John Deere 4020s. He saw Beck, walked over. "You really gonna try this with that, Oliver?" "That's why I'm here." Beck, that tractor is 26 years old. These others are all 5 years old or newer. Twice the horsepower, we'll see. The pull started. First John Deere. 180 feet before the engine started lugging. International 1066. 195 feet, Case 1070. 175 feet, Massey Ferguson. 210 feet. Best so far, second John Deere. Donald's. 205 feet, then Beck. She pulled up to the sled, hooked the chain. Crowd was watching. Some laughing, some curious, some hoping she'd embarrass herself. Beck opened the throttle. The Continental roared. Deeper sound than any tractor there. The Oliver pulled 100 feet, 150 feet. 200 feet, the crowd went quiet. 225 feet, 250 feet. Engine still strong, no lugging, front end staying down. 275 feet. Finally, the sled weight got too much. The Oliver stopped, 275 feet. Longest pull of the day, from a 26-year-old tractor, built for $360. The crowd erupted, not mocking. Cheering, Donald Moore stood at the fence, staring. His $6,500 John Deere had pulled 70 feet less than Beck's $360 Oliver. After the demonstration, 5 farmers approached Beck, all asking the same question. "Can you do that for my tractor?" Beck looked at them. "Depends. Can you wait 6 months, and can you supply the parts?" "I'm not running a business. I'm helping neighbors." All 5 said yes. Stephen Wright was at the fair, saw the whole thing. He left early, didn't speak to anyone. And Beck Anderson kept a building, because the field doesn't lie. And neither do results. Despite Stephen Wright's whispers, the work kept coming, slowly, one farmer at a time, always by word of mouth. Beck never advertised, never sought it. The work came to her the way water finds the lowest point, naturally, inevitably. Following the path of least resistance, a farmer would mention it to another farmer. That farmer would mention it at the elevator. Someone at the elevator would tell his neighbor, and eventually a man with tired tractor and thin wallet would show up in Beck's yard. hat in hand, asking if the stories were true. They were true, all of them. By 1975, she'd done 8 conversions. By 1978, 15. $150 labor each. Farmers supplied parts. Beck farmed her 200 acres with the Continental-powered Oliver. The engine never gave trouble. Started on the coldest January mornings when other tractors sat dead in their sheds. Burned clean, ran cool. Asked for nothing but oil changes and occasional valve adjustment. She kept costs where Kenneth taught her to keep them, as close to zero as physics and farming allowed, grew corn and beans in rotation, ran 30 head of cattle on grass, sold at elevator when price was right, held in bin when it wasn't. Her yields were average. Her expenses were not lowest in the county, had been since 1968. She put away money every year. Not a fortune, $7,000 in a good year, $4,000 in a bad one. But she put it away with the regularity of a woman who understood that savings weren't what was left over after spending. Savings were what you kept before spending started. By 1981, Beck had $91,000 in the bank. Then the crisis came. You know what happened in the 1980s? Interest rates went above 18%. Corn dropped below $2. Land values fell by half. The farmers who'd expanded on credit during the boom years watched their equity disappear like water on a hot griddle. Men who'd bought new equipment with borrowed money, bought new acres with bank loans, built new buildings with ag credit. All that borrowed money demanded repayment at the worst possible time. Hartfield County started losing farms 1982. 2 farms gone 1983. 3 more 1984. 1 1985. 3.92186. 2 11 families total between 1982 and 1987. Gone. 2 generations on the land, sometimes 3, not because they were bad farmers, because they'd built their operations on borrowed money. And borrowed money has a way of demanding repayment when you can least afford it. Beck's expenses didn't change. They couldn't. There was nothing to cut. The Oliver burned gas and oil. Land was paid for. Cattle ate grass. Shop heated with wood stove that burned fallen timber from the creek bottom. Her monthly cash outflow in the worst year of the farm crisis was less than most farmers' monthly interest payments. She watched the auctions from a distance. Not with satisfaction. Beck wasn't built that way. She watched with quiet sadness. The sadness of a woman who understood exactly what had gone wrong and knew that nobody would have listened if she'd tried to explain it 10 years earlier. Because people don't want to hear about discipline when times are good. They only want to hear about it when times are bad, and by then it's too late. The damage done. The debt is real, the land is gone. Beck drove past the Simmons place in November 1983, saw the auction signs. Drove past the Patterson farm in April 1984, more signs. Drove past the Reynolds operation in September 1985. Same story, different family, same ending, equipment sold, land sold, families moving to town, taking jobs at the packing plant, the co-op, the grain elevator, working for wages instead of working for themselves. All because they'd believed the story everyone was telling in the 1970s. Expand, grow, leverage your equity, buy more land while prices are climbing. Buy bigger equipment while the banks are lending. Everyone was saying it. The agricultural extension agents, the farm magazines, the bankers themselves. Grow or die. That was the phrase everyone used. Grow or die. Except Beck had watched her father run 200 acres for 40 years without growing, without dying, just existing in the space between those two extremes, making enough, spending less, saving the difference. And when Kenneth died, he left her a paid-for farm worth more than most operations, twice its size, because value isn't measured in acres, it's measured in ownership. And you can't own something you owe money on. Brandon had found work again by 1983, plant mechanic in Omaha, but he came back to Hartfield on weekends. Helped Beck with harvest with cattle, with whatever needed doing. One Saturday evening they were in the shop. Beck was changing oil on the Oliver. 14,000 hours on that Continental, still running smooth as the day she started it. Brandon was quiet for a while, then. You were right, Beck looked up from the drain pan. About? All of it. The tractor. The debt. The way Dad did things. He sat on Kenneth's old workbench, the same bench that had been there since 1919. I thought you were crazy in 1971, buying that junk Oliver, spending 11 months in this shop, all for a $360 tractor. He paused. But I was making $18,000 a year at that packing plant, living in an apartment, driving a car with payments, eating out, buying things, had nothing in the bank. Then I lost the job. 2 months later, I was broke. Not could use some help broke. Actually broke. He looked around the shop. You were making half what I made, living on this paid-for farm, fixing everything yourself. And you had 60,000 in the bank by then. Beck wiped her hands on a rag. Different priorities, no different understanding. You understood what Dad was teaching us. I didn't. Not until I lost everything and had to come back here. You didn't lose everything, Brandon. You lost a job. Jobs come back. The farm would have caught me. The farm catches everyone who needs it. That's why it has to be paid for. So it's there when it's needed, Brandon nodded. That's what I didn't understand. I thought the farm was holding you back. Keeping you from doing more. Being more, Beck poured fresh oil into the oliver. The farm wasn't holding me back. It was holding me up. Fall 1984, Donald Moore's auction, 400 acres going to the bank. Donald had expanded in the late 70s, bought new land when prices were climbing, bought new equipment when banks were lending. Everyone was doing it. The agricultural advisors said it was smart. The magazine said it was necessary. The bankers said it was safe. Grow or die, Donald borrowed, not recklessly, carefully, conservatively even. But he borrowed, and when interest rates hit 18%, when corn prices collapsed, when land values dropped by half, the careful conservative borrowing became a noose. The auction was set for a Saturday in October, cold morning. Gray sky threatening rain. Beck went, not to bid, to witness. Because this was the cost of the story everyone had been telling. And someone's needed to remember it. Donald stood at the edge of his own auction, watching strangers handle his equipment, watching neighbors avoid eye contact. The land sold first. $400 an acre. Bank took it to cover the loan, then the equipment, the 2 John Deere 4020s, that cost him $6,500 each, sold for $2,500 apiece. The combine, the planter, the grain wagon. Every piece Donald had bought new, every piece he'd made payments on, all going for half what he'd paid. Donald saw Beck in the crowd. He walked over, they stood together, not talking. Just watching Donald's life get sold piece by piece. After a while, Donald spoke. I did everything right, Beck. His voice was flat, I worked hard. I made smart decisions. I expanded when everyone said to expand. Beck didn't respond immediately. You did everything the way you were told to do it. What's the difference? Being told isn't the same as being right. Donald nodded slowly. Your Oliver still running? Every day. How many hours on it now? About 10,000. No major repairs? Changed the water pump last year. $35. Donald laughed. Bitter. I spent $35 on interest every week for 10 years. He looked at his land, the land he'd grown up on, the land his father had worked. Now someone else's. You tried to tell us. No, I didn't. You showed us then. Every time someone saw that $360 tractor working, every time someone asked how you did it, you were showing us nobody wanted to see. No, Donald agreed. We didn't, because seeing would have meant admitting we were doing it wrong. And admitting you're wrong is harder than going broke, until going broke forces you to admit it anyway. Fall 1985, 1 year after Donald's auction, the Murdoch place went up, 240 acres directly south of Beck's property line. Good ground, flat, black, Iowa prime, the kind of land that doesn't come up for sale once in a generation. Except when a generation goes broke, the auction was set for Saturday afternoon. Beck arrived early, parked her truck in the back. What? At the edge of the crowd, Brandon was with her. You really gonna do this? If the price is right? And if it's not? Then I'll wait for the next one. She had a cashier's check in her jacket. $130,000. Every dollar she'd saved in 21 years. The auctioneer started at 3 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 240 acres of prime farmland. Bank has set the opening bid at $400 an acre. Nobody moved. Nobody had $400 an acre in cash in 1985. 400? No? All right, 350. Still nothing. 300. 275. At 275, a man in the front raised his paddle. Beck didn't recognize him. Seedy clothes, clean hands, shows too nice for a farm auction. 275 from older gentleman. Do I hear 300? Beck raised her hand. 300. The city man turned around, saw her, woman in canvas jacket and work boots, hands that knew tools, fakes that knew sun. He bid 325. Beck went to 350. He went to 375. The crowd was watching now. The same crowd that had laughed about the Oliver 88 14 years earlier. The same county that had wondered what in the world Beck Anderson was doing. Beck bid 400. The city man consulted with his partner. Another city man. They were investors. Chicago firm buying Iowa farmland at fire sale prices. The way outside money always does when local money dries up, the city man bid 425. Said it loud, the way city money talks when it wants to intimidate. Beck didn't flinch. 450. The crowd went quiet. Not surprised quiet. Rearinging everything they thought they knew quiet. The kind of silence that happens when a room full of people realizes simultaneously that they've been underestimating someone for 20 years. The city man looked at his partner. His partner shook his head. They were investors, they had a ceiling. $450 an acre for Iowa farmland in 1985 was above their ceiling. $450 going once. The auctioneer looked around the crowd. Going twice, nothing. Sold. $450 an acre. 240 acres. $108,000 to the lady in the back. The auctioneer looked at Beck. Method of payment? Cashier's check. I have it with me. The crowd processed it in waves first. Shock that Beck bid at all. Second, shock that she won. Third, shock that she had $108 in cash. Rebecca Anderson, the woman with the junk tractor. The woman with the orange seat on a green machine. The woman who'd never bought new equipment in her life was writing a check for $108,000. While the men who had laughed at her stood in an auction crowd, watching their neighbors lose their land, making payments on equipment they'd never fully own. Stephen Wright was there, the dealer who'd spread rumors about Beck's conversions, who'd tried to shut her down at the town council. He watched her sign the paperwork. His dealership was struggling too. Farmers weren't buying, couldn't buy. He'd made 3 tractor sales all year. Beck caught his eye across the crowd. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, just looked at him. And he understood. She'd won, not by beating him, by ignoring him, by doing the work. By saving the money, by avoiding the debt. While he'd been worrying about her taking his customers, she'd been building something he couldn't touch, financial independence, the kind that comes from owning instead of owing. From tools that work instead of tools that impress. From discipline that compounds instead of debt that multiplies. Stephen Wright left before the paperwork was done. Didn't speak to anyone. Just drove back to his dealership. To count inventory that wasn't selling. To calculate payments he could barely make. To wonder when his own auction would come. Donald Moore found Beck after the paperwork was signed. He was 60 now, living in town, working part-time at the co-op. His farm was gone, his equipment was gone, his John Deeres were gone. $108,000 cash. That's right. From the woman who builds tractors out of scrap. From the woman who doesn't make payments, Donald. There's a difference. Donald took his off, rub at the back of his neck. Your dad knew, didn't he? Knew what? That this is how it works. Keep the costs at nothing. Save the difference. Wait. The land always comes back around to the people who can pay for it. Beck looked at the field she'd just bought. 240 acres of Iowa black soil, paid for in full, owing nothing to anyone. My dad knew that a paid-for tractor and a paid-for farm are the only things a bank can't take from you. Everything else is just borrowing time. Donald nodded. I paid $13,000 for 2 John Deere 4020s. Took me 10 years to pay them off. Then sold them both for $4,000 total to make a loan payment. Lost $9,000 on tractors alone. He looked at her. You paid $360 for that, Oliver. Still running? Every day. How many hours now? Close to 14,000. Donald laughed. Not bitter this time, just amazed. 14,000 hours on a $360 tractor that everyone said was junk. The field doesn't care what it costs. It only cares if it works. And that right there is the difference between people who survive and people who don't. People who survive ask what works. People who don't ask what looks good. Donald put his cap back on. I spent 30 years trying to look like a successful farmer. You spent 30 years being one. Guess which one of us still has land? Beck farmed the combined 440 acres from 1986 through 2001. 15 heat years, the Oliver 88 ran every season. The Continental F244 logged over 14,000 hours on that adapter plate, the original Oliver transmission. The one with the bull gears that were perfect in 1971, still shifting through 6 speeds without complaint. 50-some years of service. From a tractor, the auctioneer apologized for listing. From a tractor, a county laughed about buying. Brandon's daughter Nicole started spending summers at the farm when she was 12. By 16, she could rebuild a carburetor. By 18, she could weld. By 20, she was running the operation when Beck traveled. Which wasn't often. Because Beck didn't travel, she farmed 2001. Beck was 63. She called Nicole into the kitchen. I'm done with what? Farming. I'm retiring. Farm's yours if you want it. Nicole's eyes went wide. Mine? 440 acres. Paid for. Equipment works. Cattle are healthy. Books are clean. It's yours. What about Dad? The other uncles? They had their chance. They chose different. You chose this. Nicole looked out at the fields. What do I owe you? Nothing. It's a gift. Same way Kenneth gave it to me. Same way his father gave it to him. What? Just one condition. What? Don't borrow money to expand. Don't buy new when used works. Don't make payments if you can pay cash. The farm stays paid for, always. Nickel nodded. I understand, do you? Yes, the farm catches people who need it. But only if it's paid for, Beck smiled. You learned. 2003, Hartfield County Farm Bureau annual dinner. They invited Beck to, she was 65, retired. Never spoken publicly in her life. She almost said no. Nickel convinced her. Beck stood at the podium, single index card in her hand. She read it once, put it in her pocket, spoke without notes. People have asked me for 30 years how I built a tractor for $360. That's the wrong question. The question is why everyone else paid $6,500 for the same capability. She paused. I didn't do anything special. I looked at what I had. I looked at what I needed. I found the cheapest path between those 2 points. That's not genius. That's arithmetic. Another pause. My father taught me that a tool is only as expensive as the problem it solves. If the problem costs $360 to solve, then $6,500 is not a better tool. It's a more expensive mistake. She looked around the room, saw Donald Moore in the back, saw Stephen Wright near the door, saw farmers who'd survived, saw empty chairs where farmers used to sit. I bought 240 acres in 1985 with cash. Cash I saved because my tractor cost $360 instead of $6,500. Because my repairs cost parts and time instead of dealer invoices. Because my fuel bill was half of what it would have been with newer, fancier equipment. Equipment that did the exact same job mine did. Final pause. People looked at my tractor and saw junk. I looked at their payments and saw the same thing. She stepped down. The room was silent, then it wasn't standing ovation. Because sometimes the truth lands hardest when it arrives late, after the lesson has already been taught, after the test has already been failed, after the land has already been lost. After the dinner, Donald found Beck in the parking lot. He was 72 now, fully retired, living off Social Security and a part-time job his grandson got him at the hardware store. $360. I paid $13,000 for 2 tractors that are both gone. You paid $360 for one that's still running. It's not about the tractors, Donald. It never was. I know. It's about the land. It's about ownership. If you own your tools, you own your time. If you own your time, you own your future. If somebody else owns your tools, they own all 3. Donald nodded slowly. He'd known this somewhere deep for a long time. He just never heard anyone say it out loud with such plainness. Your father raised a hell of a farmer, Beck. My father raised someone who pays attention. The farming part took care of itself. Donald was quiet for a moment. Then, let me ask you something. What do you see when you look at a rusted tractor behind a collapsed barn? Beck thought. I see a frame that's probably solid. I see a transmission that might outlast the rest of the machine. I see potential. Most people see nothing. A relic. Something for the crusher. Most people see what something is. I see what it could become. That's the difference, isn't it? Between what? Between someone who buys and someone who builds. Beck smiled. Donald, you're finally asking the right questions. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many people are we underestimating right now because they don't do things the way we expect? How many crazy Becks are out there building something remarkable while everyone else is laughing? Donald looked at the stars. Same stars that had been over Iowa farmland for thousands of years. Same stars that would be there long after all of them were gone. I wish I'd asked these questions 30 years ago. You asked them at exactly the right time. When's that? When you were finally ready to hear the answers. Today, Tusuru 24. Nicole farms the 440 acres. The Oliver 88 is still running, 52 years old. The Continental F204 has logged over 14,000 hours on Beck's adapter plate, the original Oliver transmission. The one with the bull gears perfect in 1971, still shifting. Kenneth's shop still standing. Workbench same one his grandfather built. Vise still bolted where it's been since 1919. Nickel's son is 14, learning to use the drill press. 4 generations of Andersons, each one building what they needed from what others discarded. Beck passed away in 2019, age 81. Peacefully, in the same house where she was born. The farm was paid for, the equipment was paid for. Everything she owned, free and clear. Her obituary in the Hartfield Gazette was 3 paragraphs. It didn't mention the $40 tractor. Didn't mention the 440 acres. Didn't mention the $108,000 cash bid. It said, Rebecca Anderson farmer. Lived according to her principles. Left things better than she found them. Brandon spoke at the funeral. He told the story of the Oliver 88, the whole story. The auction, the Continental engine, the 11 months in the shop, the adapter plate that cracked, the second attempt that worked, the field test, the conversions, the crisis, the land purchase. He told it all, and at the end he said, "My sister taught me that the most expensive thing you can own is something you haven't paid for yet. The second most expensive thing is believing everyone who tells you there's only one way to do something." Beck bought a $40 tractor. She built it into a $360 working machine. She farmed it for 30 years. She saved $91,000, while everyone else saved nothing. She bought 240 acres when everyone else was losing theirs. And she did it all by asking one simple question. What do I actually need? Not what does everyone else have. Not what's the newest, not what will impress people. Just what do I actually need? And then she built exactly that. Nothing more, nothing less. The Oliver 88 still runs. Every spring Nicole starts it up. The Continental catches on the second turn. Just like it did in August 1972, just like it's done for 52 years, the county laughed at a woman buying junk. They stopped laughing when they saw what she built. And they really stopped laughing when they saw what she bought while they were selling. Have you ever bought something everyone thought was worthless but you saw its potential? Maybe it was an old car, a broken tool, a piece of furniture, or even an idea nobody believed in. Did it work out? Did people change their minds? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. $360, a Continental engine, a farmer's daughter. The tractor nobody wanted. In the hands of the woman nobody understood. Until they saw what it did in the field. Until they saw what she did with the money she didn't spend. Until they saw the land she bought with cash while they were making payments. Until they understood that the most valuable thing you can own isn't the newest, isn't the biggest, isn't the most expensive. It's the thing that's paid for, because a paid-for tractor and a paid-for farm are the only things a bank can't take from you. Everything else is just borrowing time. And Beck Anderson understood that the difference between building wealth and building debt is nothing more than asking the right question. Not what can I afford to borrow, but what can I afford to own? Not what will impress my neighbors, but what will still be working when my neighbors are gone. Not what everyone else is doing, but what actually works. The field doesn't lie, the ledger doesn't lie, the bank statement doesn't lie. And Beck Anderson spent 63 years listening to things that don't lie, while everyone else listened to things that do. That's the difference. That's the whole difference. And it's worth more than all the new tractors in Hartfield County.